The rain came down like the sky itself was crying for her. Adiz Okonkwo Bennett stood barefoot on the cracked sidewalk outside the small two-bedroom apartment she could barely afford, holding two black trash bags that contained everything she owned in this world. Her daughter Tiana, only 8 years old, clutched her hand so tight that Adiz could feel her tiny nails digging into her palm. The little girl was not crying. That was the part that broke Adiz the most. Tiana had stopped crying weeks ago, the way children do when they learn that tears do not change anything. "Mama," Tiana whispered, her voice small under the roar of the storm. "Why is the man putting our chair on the truck?" Adiz could not answer. Her throat was closed up tight, like someone had wrapped a fist around it. 3 days. It had been only 3 days since she signed the divorce papers in that cold office downtown. 3 days since Russell had walked out of the courtroom without even looking back at her. 3 days since the man she had given 15 years of her life to had told the judge that she was not the same woman he married, and that he wanted his freedom. 3 days, and now the bank had come for the apartment too. Russell had stopped paying the rent 2 months before the divorce was final, and she had not known. He had emptied the joint savings account the same week. By the time Adiz realized what was happening, it was already too late. The eviction crew was a polite older man named Mr. Hopkins and 2 younger workers who would not meet her eyes. They moved her furniture out into the wet driveway with a kind of careful sadness, as if they understood that they were not just carrying chairs and tables, but pieces of a life that had fallen apart. Adiz's nursing scrubs were soaked through. She had come straight from a 16-hour shift at Mercy Children's Hospital, where she had spent the night holding a 4-year-old boy with leukemia while his mother slept in the chair beside the bed. She had not even had time to shower. The smell of hospital soap still clung to her skin. She watched as Mr. Hopkins carried out the rocking chair her grandmother had given her on her wedding day. Grandma Ruthie had carved the swirls on the armrests herself, with hands that had picked cotton in Mississippi as a girl, and built a life with nothing but stubborn faith and prayer. Adiz had rocked Tiana to sleep in that chair every night for the first 2 years of her daughter's life, and now it was sitting in the rain, getting ruined. "Mrs. Bennett," Mr. Hopkins said gently, "is there somewhere we can help you take these things? You got family nearby." Adiz opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. Her mother lived 3 states away in Atlanta, and Mama Falek had her own troubles, taking care of Adiz's sick aunt. Her best friend Bernadette had a small apartment above her bakery, but Bernie was already letting Adiz and Tiana sleep on her couch starting tonight. She had nowhere to put a rocking chair. "You can leave it," Adiz said finally, her voice cracking. "Just leave it on the curb. Maybe somebody will take it." Mr. Hopkins looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, set the chair down gently on the wet pavement, and turned away. Adiz saw him wipe his face with the back of his hand, and she did not know if it was the rain or something else. Tiana pulled on her mother's scrubs. "Mama, I'm cold." Adiz knelt down right there in the puddle, not caring about the water soaking through her last clean pair of pants. She pulled her daughter into her arms and held her so tight she was afraid she might break her. "I know, baby, I know. Mama is going to fix it. Mama is going to fix everything, I promise." But even as she said it, she did not believe her own words. How was she going to fix anything? Russell had taken everything. The car, the savings. The credit cards were maxed out in her name because he had used her social security number for things she had never agreed to. She had $943 in her checking account, a daughter who needed shoes and food and stability, and a job that paid just barely enough to survive even when everything was going right. And nothing was going right. A car horn beeped softly behind her. Adiz turned, still kneeling, and saw a long black town car pulling up to the curb. The driver got out, an older black gentleman in a perfectly pressed gray suit, holding a large umbrella. He walked around the car and approached her with the careful steps of a man who did not want to startle her. "Mrs. Bennet?" he asked. His voice was deep and kind. "Mrs. Adiz Okonkwo Bennet." Adiz stood up slowly, pulling Tiana behind her. In her neighborhood, you did not trust strangers in nice cars who knew your full name. Her grandmother had taught her that. "Who was asking?" The man tipped his head respectfully. "My name is Walter Green. I work for the law firm of Crawford and Associates. My employer, Mr. Theodore Crawford, has been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. We left messages at the hospital and at this address. Did you not receive them?" Adiz blinked. She thought of the stack of unopened mail sitting on her kitchen counter, mail she had been too tired and too heartbroken to look at. She thought of the messages she had ignored at work because she assumed they were debt collectors. I have been going through some things," she said. "I understand, ma'am. I am very sorry to find you in this circumstance." Mr. Green glanced at the trash bags, the wet rocking chair, the small girl shivering behind her mother's legs. His face did not change, but his eyes softened. "Mrs. Bennet, my employer needs to see you as soon as possible. It concerns the estate of your grandmother, Mrs. Ruthie Me Bennet. There are matters that must be discussed with you in person." Adiz frowned. "My grandmother passed away 6 months ago. We already had her funeral. There was no estate. She lived in a 1-bedroom house in Mississippi. The bank took it after she died because of her medical bills." Mr. Green's expression remained perfectly polite. "Mrs. Bennet, I am not at liberty to discuss the details on the street, but I will tell you this. What you believe about your grandmother is not the full story. Mr. Crawford has been waiting 15 years to give you a message, and what he has to tell you will change everything you think you know about your family." Adiz stood very still. The rain was still falling, but somehow she could not feel it anymore. "Mama," Tiana whispered, "who is that man?" Adiz did not answer. She was looking at Walter Green's face, looking for the lie, the trick, the cruel joke, but she did not see one. "Will you come with me, Mrs. Bennet, right now?" Mr. Green asked. "Mr. Crawford has cleared his schedule. He has been waiting." Adiz looked down at her daughter, then at the trash bags, then at the rocking chair sitting alone in the rain. And something inside her, something that had been quiet and small for a very long time, lifted up its head and listened. The town car moved through the city like a slow black ship. Tiana sat in the back seat with her face pressed to the window, watching the buildings get taller and taller. She had never been downtown in a car like this. She had never been in any car this nice. The seats were soft leather, and there was a small bottle of water in a cup holder for her, with a label that had her name written on it in careful handwriting. For Tiana. The little girl held the bottle in both hands and did not drink it. She was afraid to open it. Adiz sat beside her, still in her wet scrubs, her hair pulled back in a tired bun that had come halfway loose. She had argued with Mr. Green at first. She had said she could not just leave her belongings on the curb. He had assured her that a moving truck would arrive within the hour to take everything to a secure storage facility, paid for by the firm. He had handed her a phone with her best friend Bernadette already on the line. "Girl, what is going on?" Bernie had said, her voice loud and worried. "Some man just called my bakery saying you needed to be at some downtown office and that I should not worry about you tonight." "Bernie, I do not even know what is happening," Adiz had whispered. "He said it has something to do with Grandma Ruthie." There had been a long silence on the other end. Then Bernie had said very quietly, "Adiz, you go, you hear me. You take that baby and you go see what that man has to say. Your grandmother was not a regular woman, I am telling you. My own mama always said there was something different about Miss Ruthie. You go." So Adiz had gone. Now the town car pulled up in front of a tall glass building that seemed to stretch all the way to heaven. A doorman in a long black coat opened the car door, and Mr. Green helped Tiana down to the sidewalk like she was a small princess. He even bowed a little to her. Tiana's eyes got very big. "Mama," she whispered as they walked into the lobby, "is this a hotel?" "No, baby, it is an office building." It is shiny. It really was. The floors were polished marble that reflected the lights above. There were tall plants in big golden pots, and a security desk with two men in dark suits who nodded at Mr. Green as he passed. They got into a private elevator with a brass plate next to the buttons that read CRAWFORD and Associates, 42nd floor. The elevator went up so smoothly that Adiz barely felt it move. When the doors opened, they stepped out into a quiet, beautiful room with thick carpet and walls lined with books. A young woman behind a curved wooden desk stood up immediately. "Mrs. Bennet, welcome. Mr. Crawford is waiting for you. Please come this way." Adiz felt very aware of her wet scrubs and her tired face. She wanted to apologize for how she looked, but the young woman did not seem to notice or care. She led them down a long hallway and opened a heavy wooden door. The office on the other side of that door was the biggest room Adiz had ever been in. One whole wall was a window looking out at the city, with the rain still falling against the glass. There was a long table in the middle with 12 chairs around it, and at the far end, a small old man with snow-white hair stood up slowly from his seat. He was thin and very tall, with skin the color of dark honey and eyes that were a little watery. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Adiz's car had been worth before Russell took it. But his face was the kindest face Adiz had seen in a very long time. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, and his voice trembled a little. "My God, you look just like her, just like Ruthie." Adiz stopped in the middle of the room. Tiana clung to her hand. "You knew my grandmother." The old man came around the table slowly. He walked with a slight limp, leaning on a polished wooden cane. "I knew your grandmother for 53 years, child. I was her lawyer. I was her friend. And I have been waiting half my life for the day I would get to meet you." He stopped a few feet away from her, as if he was afraid to come any closer. His eyes filled with water. "My name is Theodore Crawford, but your grandmother always called me Teddy. Please, please come and sit down. There is so much to tell you, so very much." Adiz did not move. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her ears. "Mr. Crawford, with respect, I do not understand any of this. My grandmother was a maid. She cleaned houses in Jackson, Mississippi for 40 years. She lived in a small house with no air conditioning. When she got sick, the medical bills took everything she had. There was no money. There was nothing. So whatever this is, sir, I think there has been some kind of mistake." Mr. Crawford smiled. It was a soft, sad, knowing smile. "Mrs. Bennet, there has been no mistake. Your grandmother was indeed a maid for 2 years, when she was a very young woman. After that, she became something else. Something she chose never to tell her family about. Please, sit, and let me tell you the story of who Ruthie Mee Bennet really was." Adiz sat down slowly in the chair he pulled out for her. Tiana climbed into her lap. The little girl was so quiet. She seemed to understand that something very big was happening, even if she did not know what. Mr. Crawford sat across from them. He folded his old hands on the table. "In 1968, he began, your grandmother was 20 years old. She was working as a housemaid for a wealthy white family in Jackson. The man of the house, Mr. Edmund Pearson, was a real estate developer. He was a hard man, a cruel man, but he had a daughter, a sickly little girl named Catherine, who he loved more than anything in the world. Catherine had something wrong with her heart. The doctors said she would not live past her 10th birthday." Adiz listened, holding her daughter tight. "Your grandmother became Catherine's nursemaid. She slept on a cot in the little girl's room. She read to her. She prayed over her. She did everything those doctors said could not save her, and somehow, by the grace of God or by the strength of Ruthie Mee Bennet's love, that child lived. She turned 10. She turned 15. She turned 20. Catherine Pearson grew up healthy because of your grandmother." Mr. Crawford paused. His old eyes looked far away. "When Catherine was 25 years old, her father died of a heart attack. He left his entire real estate company to her. And Catherine, who never married and who had no children of her own, did something nobody expected. She made your grandmother her business partner. Adi stared at him. What? Half ownership, equal shares. Catherine said that without Ruthie she would not be alive, and without her being alive there would be no company, so she made Ruthie her partner. They built that company together for 30 years. They expanded into commercial real estate, then international holdings, hotels, office buildings, apartment complexes in 12 countries. He paused again. When Catherine died in 2001, she left her half of the company to Ruthie. Your grandmother became the sole owner. Adiz could not speak. Mrs. Bennet, your grandmother has been one of the wealthiest women in America for more than 2 decades, and she chose, for reasons of her own, to live like she had nothing. She wanted to know if her family would still love her if there was nothing to gain. She watched all of you, and she made her choices. The old man's voice broke a little. And she chose you, Adiz. Out of everyone in the family, she chose you to inherit everything. The room was so quiet that Adiz could hear her own heart beating. She held Tiana close to her chest and tried to make her mind understand the words she had just heard. They did not fit together properly. They were like puzzle pieces from different boxes, all jumbled up. Mr. Crawford, she said slowly, I think there must still be a mistake. My grandmother was the kindest woman in the world, but she was poor, sir. I helped pay for her medicine when she got sick. I sent her money every month from my nursing salary. She lived in a house that had a leaky roof. She wore the same 3 dresses to church for 30 years. If she had money, she would have helped my mother when she was struggling. She would have helped me with college. She would have done something. Mr. Crawford nodded gently. He did not seem surprised by her response at all. Ruthie told me you would say that, almost word for word. He reached down beside his chair and picked up a thick brown leather folder. He set it carefully on the table between them. She left a letter for you. She said when you came to me, I should give it to you before anything else. She said you would need to read it before you could believe the rest. He slid the folder across the table. Adiz stared at it for a long moment. Then she opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single envelope. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was Grandma Ruthie's handwriting, the same careful, looping letters she had used to sign every birthday card and every Christmas note Adiz had ever received in her life. For my Adiz, my sunshine, my strong girl. Adiz pressed the envelope to her chest. Her eyes filled up with tears. She had not been able to cry in 3 days, not really, not the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep. But now the tears came and they would not stop. Tiana looked up at her mother's face. Mama, do not cry. Great-grandma is in heaven now, she is happy. Adiz laughed through her tears and kissed the top of her daughter's head. Then she opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages long, written on plain white paper. My dearest Adiz, if you are reading this, then I am gone home to be with the Lord, and Mr. Teddy Crawford has finally given you the news I asked him to keep for 15 years. You are probably angry with me right now. You are probably confused. I do not blame you, child. I want to explain. I was born in a sharecropper's cabin in Mississippi in 1948. My mama and daddy worked themselves to death in the cotton fields. They never owned a single thing in this world but the love they had for each other and the love they had for me. When they passed on, I was 16 years old. I had nothing but the clothes on my back. I went to work as a maid because that was what was offered to me, and I was grateful for the work. Then God gave me the gift of saving Catherine Pearson's life. And Catherine, bless her heart, gave me a gift in return that I never asked for and never wanted. She made me a rich woman. Adiz, I want you to understand something. Money is a strange thing. It can be a great blessing and it can be a great curse. I watched Catherine's family, her cousins, her uncles, her aunts. The minute her daddy died and she got that money, they became different people. They smiled at her with hungry eyes. They asked her for things. They told her they loved her in voices that made my stomach turn. Catherine was a smart woman and she saw it too. She used to cry on my shoulder at night. She said, "Ruthie, I do not know who loves me for me anymore. I do not know who is real." I made a promise to myself that day. I promised God Almighty that no child of mine, and no grandchild of mine, would ever have to wonder if the people around them loved them for who they were or for what they had. So I never told anyone, not your mother, not your aunts, not your uncles. I lived my life simple. I went to my church. I cleaned my own house. I cooked my own collard greens on Sundays. I was happy, child. I was so happy. I watched all of you grow up, and I saw what you were made of. I saw your cousin Devont buy a new car every year on credit and complain about being broke. I saw your Aunt Pearline marry 3 different men who all left her with debts. I saw your Uncle Bobby Ray run through his whole pension in 18 months at the casino. And I saw you, Adiz. I saw you work 2 jobs to put yourself through nursing school. I saw you take care of sick children at the hospital like they were your own. I saw you send me money every single month, even when you barely had enough for yourself. I saw you marry that Russell, and I knew the day I met him at your wedding that he was not right. He had hungry eyes, child. The same kind of eyes Catherine's cousins had. But I did not say nothing, because you had to learn for yourself. Now you have learned, and now it is time for you to know the truth. Everything I have, Adiz, every building, every dollar, every share of every company, it is all yours now. Mr. Crawford will explain the details. There are people who depend on these companies for their living. Thousands of people. I am asking you to take care of them the way you have taken care of every sick child in your hospital. Do not be afraid, my sunshine. You were born for this. I have been watching you all your life, and I know. Take care of my great-granddaughter. Tell her about her great-grandmother who loved her so much. And do not let any man, ever again, make you feel like you are less than the queen God made you to be. I love you forever. Grandma Ruthie. Adiz could not see the letter any more through her tears. She held it against her face, and she cried in a way she had not cried since she was a little girl. She cried for her grandmother. She cried for Russell. She cried for the woman she had been and the woman she did not know how to be yet. She cried for the rocking chair sitting in the rain. Tiana climbed up and wrapped her little arms around her mother's neck. "It is okay, Mama. It is okay." Mr. Crawford waited patiently. He had a clean white handkerchief ready, which he passed across the table when Adiz finally lifted her head. "Take all the time you need," he said softly. Adiz wiped her face. She breathed in, she breathed out. "Mr. Crawford, tell me the rest." The old man nodded. He opened another folder. Bennett Holdings International is currently valued at approximately $712 billion. We have offices in 43 countries. We employ just under 200,000 people worldwide. The company owns commercial real estate, residential apartments, hotels, and a controlling interest in 2 airlines. He paused. "As of this moment, Mrs. Bennett, all of it belongs to you." Adiz did not sleep that night. She lay on Bernadette's couch with Tiana tucked into her arms, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above her. Bernie had made her sit down at the kitchen table and eat a full plate of red beans and rice and cornbread before she would even talk about anything. Bernie was like that. She believed that a hungry woman could not think straight, and a tired woman could not make decisions, and a woman who had been crying needed to be fed before she needed to be advised. But after Tiana had been bathed and put to bed in Bernie's spare room, the 2 friends had sat at the kitchen table with cups of tea, and Adiz had told her everything. Bernie had not screamed. She had not jumped up. She had not even gasped. She had just looked at her best friend with steady, knowing eyes, and she had said one thing. "Your grandmama was the smartest woman I ever knew, and she was right about Russell." Now, in the dark living room, Adiz listened to her daughter breathing softly, and she thought about everything Mr. Crawford had told her. There was so much. He had given her 3 thick binders to take home. He had set up an appointment for her at the corporate headquarters tomorrow morning. He had explained that the company had been run by an interim board of directors since her grandmother's death, and that they had been waiting for her to come forward. He had explained that there were certain people, certain very powerful people, who would not be happy to see her. "Your grandmother had enemies, Mrs. Bennet," he had said. "Successful women always do, and there is one man in particular you must be careful of. His name is Cornelius Hartwell III. He runs Hartwell Industries. He has been trying to buy controlling interest in Bennett Holdings for 15 years. Your grandmother refused him every time. With you new and untested, he will try every trick he knows." Adiz did not know anything about business. She knew how to take care of sick children. She knew how to insert an IV into the tiny vein of a baby. She knew how to make a frightened mother feel less alone in a hospital waiting room. That was what she knew. How was she supposed to run a company worth $700 billion? Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She picked it up and her stomach turned over. It was a text message from Russell. "Heard some news today. Need to talk. Call me first thing tomorrow. This is urgent." Adiz stared at the message. How had he heard already? It had been less than 12 hours. She did not respond. The phone buzzed again. Another text. "Ada, don't play with me. We need to talk before you do anything. I know my rights. We were married for 15 years. Adiz put the phone face down on the table. She closed her eyes and she heard her grandmother's voice in her head, the voice from the letter. "Do not let any man, ever again, make you feel like you are less than the queen God made you to be." She fell asleep with that voice carrying her into a dream where she was walking through a beautiful garden, and her grandmother was waiting for her at the gate. The next morning she woke up to her phone ringing. It was Mr. Crawford. "Mrs. Bennet, I am very sorry to call you so early, but there is a situation. Your ex-husband has filed an emergency motion in family court to have your divorce settlement reopened. He is claiming undisclosed assets." Adiz sat up so fast that she knocked the blanket off the couch. "What? How is that even possible? The divorce was final 3 days ago." "He has retained a very aggressive law firm. They moved very fast. The hearing is this afternoon at 3 o'clock. I can be there. I have already arranged for one of our family law specialists to represent you, but you must be there in person." Adiz pressed her hand to her forehead. "Mr. Crawford, he cannot get any of this money, can he? My grandmother left it to me, not to him. We were already divorced when I inherited." There was a small silence on the other end of the line. "That should be the case, Mrs. Bennet. But Mr. Hartwell, who I mentioned to you yesterday, has very deep connections in the legal world, and I have reason to believe he is funding your ex-husband's case. He wants to create chaos. He wants you tied up in court for years. He wants to weaken your position so he can move on the company." Adiz closed her eyes. "What do I do?" "You come to the office, right now. We have 1 hour before we need to leave for the courthouse. And Mrs. Bennet, you wear the suit we sent over to your friend's apartment last night. You walk into that courtroom looking like the woman you are now, not the woman you were yesterday." A suit Adiz had not even noticed. She got up and went to the front door of Bernie's apartment. There were 3 large boxes stacked there with the name of an expensive department store on the side. Inside the first box was a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, a cream silk blouse, and a pair of low black heels. There were also 3 other suits, several blouses, and a bag with personal items, all in her exact size. Bernie came out of the kitchen in her bathrobe and saw the boxes. "Lord have mercy," Bernie said. "That old lawyer does not play." Adiz got dressed. When she stepped out of the bathroom, Bernie's mouth fell open. Tiana, who had just woken up, stared at her mother with huge eyes. "Mama, you look like a lady on TV." Adiz looked at herself in Bernie's hallway mirror. The woman looking back at her was not the woman who had stood in the rain yesterday holding trash bags. The woman in the mirror had her grandmother's posture. She had her grandmother's eyes. She had her grandmother's spine. "I have to go to court, baby. I will be back this evening. Auntie Bernie is going to take care of you today." "Where are you going?" Adiz knelt down in her new suit and looked her daughter in the eye. "I am going to fight for our future, and I am going to win." The town car was already waiting outside. Mr. Green held the door open for her. As she rode through the city, she watched the world go by through the tinted windows, people walking to work, children going to school, mothers pushing strollers. None of them knew. None of them knew that an ordinary tired nurse had become, overnight, one of the richest women in the country. She did not feel rich, she felt scared. But she also felt something else, something new, something she had not felt in a long, long time. She felt awake. At the office, Mr. Crawford introduced her to Geneva Pickering, a sharp-eyed black woman in her mid-40s who was a senior executive at Bennett Holdings. Geneva had worked with Grandma Ruthie for 20 years. "Mrs. Bennett, I have been waiting to meet you for so long. Your grandmother spoke of you constantly. She said you had her mother's spirit in you." Geneva briefed her quickly on the company, on the players she needed to know, on the immediate threats. She walked her through the situation with Cornelius Hartwell. She explained that the board meeting was scheduled for Friday, and that Hartwell had already begun making calls to certain board members, trying to convince them that Adiz was unfit to lead. "He thinks you are nothing," Geneva said quietly. "He thinks you are some little nurse who will be easy to push around. He has no idea who Ruthie Mee Bennett's granddaughter really is." The family lawyer arrived. Her name was Mrs. Patris Whitfield, a tall woman with locks piled on top of her head and a no-nonsense manner. They went over the facts of the divorce in detail. They prepared their argument. By the time they walked into the courtroom that afternoon, Adiz was as ready as she could possibly be. Russell was already there. He was sitting at the table with his lawyer, a slick young man in an expensive gray suit. Russell looked up when she walked in. His mouth fell open. He had not seen her dressed like this, ever. His eyes went up and down. Then he leaned over and whispered something furiously to his lawyer. Adiz did not look at him. She walked to her own table with her head held high. She sat down beside Mrs. Whitfield. The judge was an older black woman with reading glasses on the tip of her nose. Her nameplate said Honorable Loretta Sinclair. Adiz felt a small flicker of hope. "This is an unusual motion," Judge Sinclair said. "Mr. Bennett, your divorce was finalized 3 days ago. You are claiming that your ex-wife concealed assets during the proceedings. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Russell's lawyer said smoothly. "We have reason to believe that Mrs. Bennett was aware of a substantial inheritance she was about to receive, and that she failed to disclose this during settlement negotiations." Mrs. Whitfield stood up. "Your Honor, with respect, my client received notice of her inheritance yesterday afternoon. The estate was probated and finalized 6 months ago, but my client was unaware of its existence. She is the granddaughter of the late Mrs. Ruthie Mee Bennett. She had no knowledge of her grandmother's true financial situation prior to yesterday. We have documentation to support this." Mrs. Whitfield handed up a folder of documents. The judge read them carefully. Russell's lawyer began to argue, but the judge held up one hand. "Counselor, are you prepared to prove that Mrs. Bennett knew about an inheritance during settlement negotiations? Because the documentation in front of me suggests that she did not, and I am not inclined to reopen a finalized divorce based on speculation." Russell's face was getting red. He whispered furiously to his lawyer again. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we would like to argue that under the doctrine of commingled marital efforts, my client contributed to the relationship that resulted in this inheritance, and therefore is entitled to a share." Mrs. Whitfield laughed out loud. She actually laughed. Adiz had never seen anyone laugh in a courtroom before. Your Honor, the inheritance is from my client's grandmother. The grandmother was known to dislike Mr. Bennett intensely. There is no possible argument that Mr. Bennett contributed to the relationship between my client and her grandmother. This motion is frivolous and should be dismissed with sanctions. Judge Sinclair took off her reading glasses. She looked at Russell directly. Mr. Bennett, I have been a judge for 27 years. I have seen many men try many things, but what you are attempting here is one of the lowest things I have ever witnessed. You divorced this woman 3 days ago. You took her car, her savings, and her dignity. And now that she has come into something good, you want to show up with your hand out. Russell opened his mouth to speak, but the judge was not finished. Motion denied. Court costs assessed against the petitioner, and Mr. Bennett, if you file another frivolous motion in this court, I will hold you in contempt. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor, Russell muttered. The gavel came down. Adiz stood up. She walked past Russell's table. She did not look at him, but she heard him say quietly in a voice meant only for her ears, "You think this is over, Ada?" She stopped, she turned. She looked at him for the first time. Russell, it is so over that it never even started. And she walked out of that courtroom with her head held high. Friday morning came too fast. Adiz stood in front of the mirror in the bedroom of the suite Mr. Crawford had insisted she and Tiana move into. The hotel was the most beautiful place Adiz had ever stayed in. The bathtub alone was the size of her old kitchen. Tiana had spent the entire first night running from room to room in her pajamas, squealing with delight every time she found another light switch. But this morning there was no squealing. Tiana was at a private school that Geneva had arranged for her, attending her first day with 3 new uniforms and a backpack full of supplies. Mr. Green had driven her there himself. He had told Adiz that Tiana had not been afraid at all. She had walked into the big front door of the school like she had been doing it her whole life. Adiz adjusted her suit. It was a dark gray today, with a high collar and tailored sleeves. Geneva had told her last night that this was her armor. You walk into that boardroom, Mrs. Bennett, and you do not flinch. You do not apologize. You do not explain yourself. You sit at the head of that table because that is your seat. You earned it the day Ruthie Mae Bennett chose you. The board meeting was at 10 o'clock. There were 12 members on the board of Bennett Holdings International. Geneva had walked her through every single one of them. There were 5 members who had been loyal to Grandma Ruthie for many years and would support Adiz without question. There were 4 members who were neutral, watching to see what kind of leader she would be. And there were 3 members who were openly working with Cornelius Hartwell. Hartwell himself was not on the board, but he had pressured Grandma Ruthie's company over the years through legal challenges, hostile bidding attempts, and quiet moves to buy up smaller companies that Bennett Holdings depended on for supply chains. He was a man who took. That was what Geneva had told her. He was a man who took, and he believed that he was entitled to take. Adiz went down to the lobby. Mr. Green was waiting with the car. He had a warm cup of tea ready for her in the back seat. She had not asked for it. He had simply learned in 3 days that she liked tea in the morning and not coffee. "Are you ready, Mrs. Bennett?" She looked at him and smiled for the first time that morning. "Mr. Green, may I ask you something?" "Of course, ma'am." "You worked for my grandmother too, did you not?" His old eyes filled up a little. He nodded slowly. 28 years, Mrs. Bennett. I drove Miss Ruthie all over this country. She was the finest woman I ever knew. She used to bring me sweet potato pie that she made with her own hands. She would not let anybody else make it. She said sweet potato pie was a sacred thing. Adiz laughed softly, and she felt tears in her eyes again. "I miss her, Mr. Green." "So do I, child, so do I, but she is here. She is right here with you today. You go and you make her proud." The headquarters of Bennett Holdings International was an enormous gleaming tower in the financial district. Adiz had only seen it from the outside before. Today she walked into the lobby, and the security guard stood up. The receptionist behind the marble desk stood up. Two young women in business suits who were standing by the elevator stood up. Word had spread. Everyone knew who she was now. Geneva was waiting for her on the executive floor. She squeezed Adiz's hand. They are all in there. Hartwell has shown up too, even though he has no right to be there. He is sitting in the observer's gallery. He came to watch what he thinks will be your downfall. Are you ready? Adiz breathed in deep. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of Tiana. She thought of every shift she had worked at the hospital, every difficult patient, every moment when she had been told she was not enough. I am ready. The boardroom was huge. The table was a long oval of polished dark wood. There were 12 people sitting around it, plus an empty chair at the head. On the far side of the room, behind a low railing, were perhaps 15 other people sitting in observers' chairs. One of them was a thin man with sharp features and silver hair that was slicked back perfectly. He wore a dark blue suit and an expensive watch. He smiled at her as she entered. That smile told her everything she needed to know about Cornelius Hartwell III. Adiz walked to the head of the table. She did not hesitate. She did not look at anyone. She sat down in the chair that had once belonged to her grandmother. She placed her hands flat on the table in front of her. She looked around at the 12 faces. Good morning. My name is Adiz Okonkwo Bennett. I'm the granddaughter of Ruthie Mee Bennett. As of this week, I'm the controlling shareholder of Bennett Holdings International. I called this meeting today because I want to introduce myself to all of you, and I want to listen to what you have to say. I am going to ask each of you, going around the table, to tell me one thing. One thing you believe this company should do better. One thing my grandmother got right, and one thing she did not. I want to hear from you, each of you. A murmur went around the table. This was not what they had expected. They had expected a frightened young woman who would sit silently and listen to them lecture her. Instead, they were being asked to be honest. The 5 loyal members were the first to speak. They gave thoughtful, careful answers. They praised the things Grandma Ruthie had built. They named small problems they thought needed fixing. Then the neutral members spoke. Their answers were more detailed, more critical. Adiz listened carefully. She nodded. She wrote things down on a yellow notepad in front of her. She did not interrupt. Then it came to the 3 Hartwell loyalists. The first one was a heavy-set man with a red tie. His name was Bertram Caldwell. With respect, Mrs. Bennett, I think the most important question is not what your grandmother did right or wrong. The question is what this company needs going forward, and what it needs is experienced leadership. Your grandmother, God rest her soul, was a remarkable woman, but she was an old woman in her final years, and she was no longer able to keep up with the modern market. This company needs a CEO with deep experience in real estate and international finance. With respect, Mrs. Bennett, you are a nurse. I do not see how you can run this company. The room went silent. Every person at the table watched her. Adiz did not blink. She tilted her head slightly. Mr. Caldwell, thank you for your honesty. May I ask you a question in return? Of course. How long have you served on this board? 11 years, Mrs. Bennett. And in those 11 years, have you ever brought a single original idea to this company? Have you ever launched a project? Have you ever discovered a new market? Have you ever solved a problem that was not handed to you by someone else? Bertram Caldwell turned a deep shade of red. That is not the role of a board member. Forgive me, I am new. I thought board members were supposed to provide guidance and innovation. I see I was mistaken. She turned to the next Hartwell loyalist. And you, sir, your concern. The second Hartwell man stuttered. He could not get his words out. He had clearly prepared a speech, but watching what had just happened to Caldwell had thrown him. I just feel that we should consider a partnership, a merger perhaps with a larger firm to stabilize. Adiz nodded gently. A merger with Hartwell Industries, perhaps. The man went pale. I did not say that. No, you did not, but I imagine that is what you meant. She turned to the third one, a sharp-faced woman in a dark green suit. And you? The third Hartwell loyalist looked at Adiz for a long moment. Then she did something none of the others had done. She smiled. A small, tight smile. Mrs. Bennet, I think perhaps I have been on the wrong side of this matter. I withdraw any prior objection. A small murmur went around the table. Adiz nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty, Mrs. Greggs. I will remember it. Then she turned and looked across the room at Cornelius Hartwell, who was sitting in the observers section. Mr. Hartwell, I see you have come to my meeting today. I do not believe I invited you, but since you are here, would you care to address the board? The room went very quiet. Hartwell stood up slowly. He smiled that smile of his. Mrs. Bennet, I came merely to observe, as a friend of the family. You were not a friend of my grandmother. She did not consider you a friend, so you cannot be a friend of the family. His smile did not change, but his eyes did. Be that as it may, Mrs. Bennet, I came in good faith. I wanted to congratulate you on your inheritance, and to tell you woman to woman that this company is too big for you. You will fail, and when you do, my offer to purchase the company will still be standing. Adiz stood up from her chair, slowly, calmly. She walked around the long table until she was standing directly across from Cornelius Hartwell, with only the low railing between them. Mr. Hartwell, look at me carefully. Look at my face. Look at my eyes, because I want you to remember this moment for the rest of your life. I am not going to fail. I am going to take everything my grandmother built and I am going to make it bigger. I am going to make it stronger. I am going to make it better. And the day will come, sir, when you are sitting at home in your fine house, and you will turn on the news, and you will see a story about Bennett Holdings expanding into a market that you wanted. And on that day, you will think of me, and you will know. She held his eyes. You should leave now. This is a private meeting. Cornelius Hartwell's face was white. His mouth opened. Then it closed. He turned, he walked out. The boardroom was completely silent. Then one of the loyal members began to clap, then another, then all of them. Adiz walked back to the head of the table. She sat down. Now, she said, let us get to work. That night, Adiz sat on the floor of Tiana's bedroom in their hotel suite, helping her daughter brush her doll's hair. Tiana had loved her first day of school. She had made 2 friends already. One was a little girl named Esperanza, and the other was a boy with red hair named Patrick. She had told her mother every detail at least 3 times. She had told her about the lunch they served, which had real fruit and not the kind from a can. She had told her about the music room, which had a piano you were allowed to touch with your own hands. She had told her about the teacher, Mrs. Henderson, who had hugged her on the very first day, even though they had just met. Adiz listened to it all. She drank in every word. For 3 days she had watched her daughter grow quieter and quieter, and now her little girl was bubbling up like a fountain again. That alone was worth everything she had been through. Mama, Tiana said as Adiz tucked her into bed, are we going to live here forever? Not forever, baby. We are going to find a real home, with a real bedroom for you, and a real backyard, and maybe even a dog if you are good. Tiana's eyes got huge. A dog. Maybe we will see. What kind of dog? Whatever kind you want. Tiana closed her eyes and smiled. I want a fluffy dog. Then you shall have a fluffy dog. She kissed her daughter's forehead and turned out the light. She walked to the door and was about to close it when Tiana spoke again from the dark. Mama, is Daddy going to come find us? Adiz froze in the doorway. What do you mean, baby? I mean, is he going to be mad? Is he going to come and get us? Adiz came back to the bed. She sat on the edge. She took her daughter's small hand in hers. Tiana, listen to me. I am going to make sure you are safe. Always. That is my job and I am very good at it. You do not have to worry about Daddy, okay? You just worry about being a kid. That is your job. Tiana nodded slowly. Okay, Mama. Sleep tight. You too, Mama, you too. Adiz closed the door softly. She stood in the hallway for a moment, leaning against the wall, breathing. Then she went into the living room and called Bernadette. Bernie, how did it go today, girl? It went well. I think I might be okay at this. But Bernie, I need to ask you something. Anything? My mother, I have not called her yet about any of this. I do not know what to say. She is going to ask why Grandma did not tell anyone. She is going to be hurt. She is going to be angry. I do not know how to have that conversation. Bernie was quiet for a long moment. Adiz, you need to call your mama. You hear me? You need to call her tonight before she finds out from somebody else. There is news already starting to leak. I saw something on the financial blogs this afternoon. Somebody is saying that the new heir of Bennett Holdings has been identified. They have not used your name yet, but they will. Adiz closed her eyes. Okay, I will call her right now. She hung up. She sat on the couch with her phone in her hand for a long time. Then she dialed. Mama Falik answered on the second ring. My baby, how are you? I have been worried sick. You have not called in a week. I know, Mama, I am sorry. So much has been happening. Tell me everything. Adiz told her. The eviction, the lawyer, the letter, the boardroom, all of it. Her mother did not interrupt once. When Adiz finally finished, there was a long silence. Then her mother laughed, a long, rich, deep laugh. Mama, why are you laughing? Oh, my child, my beautiful child, your grandmother, that woman. You knew. No, baby, I did not know, but I am laughing because it is exactly the kind of thing she would do. Your grandmother always said that money tells the truth about people, that you cannot know what a person really is until you give them money or take it away. She watched all of us. She was always watching, and she chose you. She always loved you the most, my Adiz. From the day you were born, she said you had something different. Mama, I am scared. There is so much to do, so many people, so much money, I do not know if I can do it. Adiz, her mother's voice was firm. Listen to me. You were born for this, your grandmother knew it, I have always known it, you have always been the one who took care of everybody. You took care of me when I was sick after your father left. You took care of your little cousins when their mama could not. You took care of those children at the hospital. You have a gift for taking care of people. And that is what running a company is, my child. It is taking care of people. It is just on a bigger scale. Adiz felt tears on her face. I miss her, Mama. I miss Grandma so much. I know, my baby, I know, but she is with you now. She is in everything you do. They talked for another hour. Mama Falik told her stories about Grandma Ruthie that Adiz had never heard before. The time Ruthie had stood up to a white sheriff in Mississippi who had tried to harass a little black boy in 1972. The time Ruthie had bought groceries for an entire family in her church for 6 months after the father lost his job and never told anyone. The time Ruthie had paid off the mortgage of the elderly widow who lived next door, also without telling anyone, and the widow had only found out years later when her son went to look up the deed. That was your grandmother. She did good in the dark. She did not need to be seen. By the time Adiz hung up, she felt different, lighter, stronger. She walked to the big window of the suite. She looked out at the lights of the city. Somewhere out there in this enormous country, her grandmother had built an empire, quietly, patiently, over 50 years, without telling a single soul in her own family. And now it was hers. She thought of Russell. She thought of Cornelius Hartwell. She thought of all the men in her life who had told her in one way or another that she was not enough. She smiled. They had no idea what was coming. The next week was a whirlwind. There were meetings with executives. There were tour of properties. There were briefings on countries Adiz had never even heard of. Bennett Holdings owned a chain of resorts in Bali. It owned a fleet of office buildings in London. It owned a controlling stake in 2 airlines, one based in Brazil and one in South Africa. It owned an apartment complex in Lagos, Nigeria, that housed 2,000 families, and the rents had not been raised in 8 years because Grandma Ruthie had not wanted to displace anyone. Adiz sat in meeting after meeting and absorbed information like a sponge. She asked questions. She wrote things down. She did not pretend to know things she did not know. She admitted ignorance freely, and she took notes when people explained. Geneva watched her work and shook her head one evening as they were leaving the building. "Mrs. Bennett, I have to tell you, you remind me of your grandmother more every day." "Geneva, you can call me Adiz, please." The older woman smiled. "Adiz, then you must call me Geneva." That weekend, Adiz did something she had been thinking about all week. She told Mr. Green to drive her and Tiana to the airport. She had chartered a small plane. They were going to Mississippi. She had to see her grandmother's house. The flight was short. Tiana sat next to her in the plane and looked out the window with her face pressed to the glass. She had never been on a plane before. "Mama, the clouds look like cotton candy." "They do, baby." "Can we eat them?" "No sugar, they are just water." "Just water?" Tiana sounded disappointed. "That is so sad." Adiz laughed. They landed in Jackson and a car was waiting for them. The driver was a local man named Mr. Junibug, an old friend of her grandmother's church, who Mr. Crawford had arranged. He drove them out to the small town of Forest, Mississippi, where Grandma Ruthie had lived the last 40 years of her life. The house was just as Adiz remembered, small, white, with a porch swing on the front porch and a garden in the back where her grandmother had grown collard greens and tomatoes and okra. The bank had taken it after Grandma died, but Mr. Crawford had quietly bought it back the very next week, and it had been sitting empty ever since, waiting. Adiz stepped onto the porch. She put her hand on the door. It was unlocked. Mr. Junibug had come earlier and turned on the lights. She stepped inside. The smell hit her first, the smell of her grandmother, lavender and biscuits and old hymnal pages, the smell that meant home. Adiz closed her eyes and breathed it in. "Mama," Tiana whispered, "whose house is this?" "This was your great-grandmother's house, baby. My grandma, she lived here." Tiana walked through the room slowly, like she was in a museum. She touched the back of the rocking chair in the living room. She looked at the framed photos on the mantel. She picked up a small porcelain figure of an angel that had been on the side table for as long as Adiz could remember. "Mama, was she nice?" "She was the nicest person in the world. I wish I could have met her." "She met you, baby. She held you when you were a baby. She kissed your face. You were just too small to remember." Adiz walked into the kitchen. The little wooden table was still there, where Grandma had served her countless meals over the years. The old refrigerator hummed in the corner. Mr. Junibug had stocked it with sweet tea and cornbread and a pan of greens, the way Grandma would have. She walked into her grandmother's bedroom. The bed was made. The Bible was still on the nightstand. There was an old framed wedding photo of Grandma and Grandpa Bennett, who had died when Adiz was a baby. He had been a kind man, a school janitor, who Grandma had loved her whole life and never replaced. On the wall above the bed was a framed piece of needlework that Grandma had stitched herself. It read, "Blessed are those who give without remembering, and who receive without forgetting." Adiz stood in front of it for a long time. She heard Tiana come into the room behind her. The little girl did not say anything. She just slipped her small hand into her mother's hand. "Mama," Tiana said softly, "I think great-grandma is here." Adiz looked down at her daughter's serious little face. "What do you mean, baby?" "I can feel her. She feels happy." Adiz knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms. They stayed there in that little bedroom for a long time, just holding each other. That afternoon, they went to the church. It was a small white wooden building with a steeple, sitting on a country road surrounded by tall pine trees. Pastor Eldridge Caldwell had been told they were coming. He met them at the door and embraced Adiz like she was his own daughter. "Sister Adiz, we have been praying for you. Sister Magnolia has been wanting to see you." He led her inside the small church. There, sitting in the front pew, was a tiny old woman with white hair pulled back in a careful bun. She wore a purple dress and a pearl pin shaped like a flower. Her hands were folded on top of an old leather Bible. She looked up when Adiz approached. "Child," Sister Magnolia said, "come here, come closer, let me look at you." Adiz sat down beside her. Sister Magnolia took her face in her old hands and looked into her eyes for a long moment. "Yes," the old woman said softly. "Yes, you have her spirit, you have her fire. Ruthie said you would. She used to sit right here in this pew with me and she would say, 'Magnolia, you wait. You wait until my Adiz comes into her own. You will see what I have always seen.'" Adiz felt the tears coming again. "Sister Magnolia, did she ever tell you about the company, about everything?" The old woman laughed softly. "Child, I knew Ruthie for 50 years. I was her best friend. Of course I knew. I was the only person in this world she told besides Mr. Crawford. She told me because she needed somebody to know, just in case something happened to her before she could put things right." Adiz stared at her. Why did she keep it secret, from everyone, from her own family? Sister Magnolia took Adiz's hand. Her old skin was thin and soft. "Sit down, child. Let me tell you something about your grandmother. When she first came into that money back in the 70s, she told her sister, just her one sister, her favorite sister, your great-aunt Pearl, and Pearl told her husband, and the husband told his brother. And inside of 6 months, Ruthie had relatives crawling out of every corner of Mississippi asking for handouts. She gave. She gave and she gave and she gave. She paid for funerals and weddings and surgeries and houses. And nobody, not one of them, ever said thank you. They just kept asking for more. And when she could not give them what they wanted, they cursed her name. They said she was selfish. They said she was a hard woman. They said she had forgotten where she came from." Sister Magnolia shook her head slowly. "That broke your grandmother's heart, child. It broke her clean in two, and she made a decision. She decided she would never tell another soul about the money. She would live small. She would do her giving in secret. She would help people without ever letting them know it was her. And she would watch her family. She would watch and she would wait. Because she wanted to find the one person who would not be ruined by it. The one person who would do good with it." The old woman squeezed Adiz's hand. "And she found you, child, she found you." Adiz could not speak. Sister Magnolia opened her old leather Bible. There was a folded piece of paper inside. She handed it to Adiz. "She gave me this 2 years before she died. She told me to give it to you when you came to find her here. Open it, child." Adiz unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a list, written in her grandmother's careful handwriting, a list of names, hundreds of names. Each name had a city beside it and a small note. Mrs. Wilbur Tate, Greenville, mortgage paid in full April 1989. The Henderson family, Memphis, college tuition for all 4 children, 1995 through 2007. Joseph Picoult, New Orleans, medical bills covered after Hurricane Katrina, 2005. The Anderson Children's Home, Atlanta, new roof and HVAC system, 2010. The list went on, page after page. Hundreds of people, churches, schools, and orphanages, decades of quiet giving. Adiz pressed the list to her chest. The tears came down her face freely. Sister Magnolia smiled. "That is who your grandmother was, child. That is the legacy she leaves you. Not just the money, not just the buildings, but the way of using them." Adiz nodded slowly. She could not speak, but in her heart she made a promise. She would carry this on. She would honor what her grandmother had built, and she would do it her own way. When Adiz and Tiana got back from Mississippi on Sunday evening, there was a message waiting for her at the hotel from Geneva. Need to see you first thing Monday morning. We have a problem. Adiz met Geneva and Mr. Crawford in the executive conference room at 7 in the morning. Tiana was at school. The morning sun came in through the tall windows and lit up the polished table. "What is going on?" Adiz asked. Geneva slid a folder across the table. "Cornelius Hartwell has filed a lawsuit. He is claiming that your grandmother committed fraud. He is alleging that she misrepresented certain real estate appraisals over a period of 15 years, and that several major transactions are therefore invalid. He is demanding access to 30 years of company records. If a judge agrees to even a fraction of what he is asking, the company will be tied up in legal proceedings for a decade. We will not be able to make any major decisions. The stock value will collapse. He will be able to buy us at fire sale prices." Adiz looked at the folder. She did not open it. "Is there any truth to it, the fraud claim?" Mr. Crawford shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. Your grandmother was the most honest woman I ever met. She refused to even round numbers in her favor on tax forms. The transactions Hartwell is questioning were all legitimate. He knows that. This is not about winning the lawsuit. This is about damage." "What can we do?" Geneva and Mr. Crawford looked at each other. Geneva spoke first. "We have a few options. We can fight him in court. That will take years. We can try to settle. He will demand a huge concession which we cannot give. Or," she paused, "or we can find something on him." Adiz frowned. "Find something on him." "He is not a clean man, Mrs. Bennet. We know it. We have heard rumors for years, but we have never had proof. Your grandmother always said that fighting in the dirt was a sin she did not want on her soul, so we never went looking, but we could go looking now." Adiz considered this. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about Sister Magnolia's words. That is the way of using them. "No," Adiz said slowly. "We do not fight in the dirt. That is not who we are. That is not who Bennett Holdings is. We fight clean." Mr. Crawford smiled a little. "Then we go to court. We will prepare the strongest defense in the history of the firm." "No," Adiz said again. "We do not go to court either, not first." They looked at her. "What do you mean?" Adiz stood up. She walked to the window. She looked out at the city. "What does Cornelius Hartwell really want?" "Your company. He wants to take Bennett Holdings." "Why?" "Because it is one of the largest privately held real estate empires in the world." "No, why does he want it? What does he want to do with it?" Geneva and Mr. Crawford were quiet for a moment. "I do not understand the question, Mrs. Bennet," Geneva said. Adiz turned around. "He is 60 years old. He already has his own company. He already has more money than he will ever spend. He wants ours not because he needs it. He wants it because he has been telling himself for 15 years that we are the prize, that we are the thing he has not been able to win. And now he has convinced himself that he has to win." She walked back to the table. "What if we did not fight him? What if we did something he cannot understand?" "What do you mean?" "What if I asked to meet with him? Just me, just him. No lawyers, no cameras, just two people in a room." Mr. Crawford looked alarmed. "Mrs. Bennet, I cannot recommend that. He is a dangerous man." "I know he is dangerous, but he is also predictable. I have seen men like him my whole life. They want a fight, so I will not give them one. I will give them something they have never seen before." Geneva tilted her head. "What would you offer him?" "I will offer him peace, with conditions." She laid out her plan. They listened. When she was done, Mr. Crawford was nodding slowly. "It is unconventional. Your grandmother would have liked it." The meeting was set for Wednesday afternoon. Hartwell had agreed almost immediately, suspicious, but unable to resist the chance to meet his enemy face to face. Wednesday came. Hartwell arrived at the Bennett Holdings building at 3 in the afternoon. He was shown up to the executive floor. Adiz was waiting for him alone in a small private room with 2 chairs and a small table and a pot of tea between them. "Mrs. Bennett," he said as he entered, "your invitation was unexpected." "Mr. Hartwell, please sit. May I pour you tea?" "I do not drink tea." "That is fine." He sat down across from her. His sharp eyes studied her. "What is this about?" Adiz poured herself a cup of tea slowly. She added 1 cube of sugar. She stirred it. She set down the spoon. "Mr. Hartwell, I have been thinking about you all week. I have been thinking about what you really want, and I think I understand now." "Oh," his mouth twisted slightly, "please enlighten me." "You are a man who needs to win. Your father was a hard man. He told you when you were a boy that the world only respects winners. You have spent your entire life proving that you are a winner. You built a company, you made money, you bought houses, you collected respect from other men like you. But there has been one thing you could never beat, one company you could never get, and that was Bennett Holdings. Hartwell's eyes narrowed. He did not speak. My grandmother humiliated you, not on purpose. She did not even know she was doing it. But for 15 years, every time you reached for her company, she said no. And she did it without ever raising her voice, without ever fighting you. She just said no and went on with her life like you did not even matter. His jaw tightened. She had hit something. And now she is gone. And you thought, finally, you would get your chance. You thought you would deal with some weak woman who would not know what to do. Instead, you got me. And I look just enough like her to make it worse. Mrs. Bennett, I did not come here to be psychoanalyzed. I know, you came here to see if I would beg. I will not. You came here to see if I would fight. I will not. I came here to make you an offer. He waited. Adiz set down her cup. Mr. Hartwell, I am willing to do something my grandmother never would have done. I am willing to enter into a partnership with you, a real partnership, with Hartwell Industries holding a minority stake in a new joint venture in a specific area where you have expertise and we do not. Logistics. We have been wanting to expand into intermodal logistics for 2 years. You have one of the largest logistics operations in the country. We could build something together that would benefit both companies. Hartwell looked stunned. He had clearly not expected this. In exchange, Adiz continued, you withdraw your lawsuit, today, by the end of business, and you sign an agreement that you will never again attempt to acquire controlling interest in Bennett Holdings or take any action that interferes with our operations for the rest of your life. He stared at her. Why would you offer me anything? Because I do not need an enemy. I have a company to run. And because, Mr. Hartwell, you are actually very good at logistics. I have read your annual reports. I am not a fool. You have done some impressive work in supply chain management. I would be a poor businesswoman if I did not recognize talent just because the person who has it has been rude to me. He almost smiled. It was almost a real smile. You are not what I expected. I am Ruthie Mee Bennett's granddaughter. You should have expected better. He sat in silence for a long moment. And if I refuse this offer, then we go to court, and you and I both know your fraud claim is empty. You will lose. It will take years. You will spend tens of millions of dollars. Your reputation will suffer. Your shareholders will get tired. And in the end, you will be poorer and weaker, and Bennett Holdings will still be standing. So really, Mr. Hartwell, this is not just my offer to you. It is your way out. He looked at her for a very long time. Then he stood up. He extended his hand across the table. Mrs. Bennett, you have a deal. She stood up. She shook his hand firmly. He turned and walked out of the room. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, the lawsuit had been withdrawn. 6 months passed. Adiz stood on the roof of the Bennett Holdings Tower at sunset, looking out at the city. The breeze blew her braids back from her face. She wore a simple black dress and flat shoes. She had just come from a meeting with the architects who were designing the first of what would be 100 new affordable housing developments across the country. Bennett Holdings was launching the largest affordable housing initiative in the history of American real estate. She had started small. The first development was in her hometown. The second was in Jackson, Mississippi, where her grandmother had grown up. They had broken ground on it last week. She thought about how far she had come. She had bought a real house, a beautiful old brick home in a leafy neighborhood with a big backyard and tall trees. Tiana had her own bedroom now, painted lavender with a canopy bed and shelves full of books. She had a fluffy dog, a little white poodle named Cot, who slept at the foot of her bed every night. Tiana was thriving at school. She had been moved up a grade because her teachers said she was advanced for her age. She had 3 best friends now. She came home every day with stories about science experiments and art projects and books she had read. Mama Falik had moved up from Atlanta. She lived in a guest cottage on the property of Adiz's house. Aunt Perline, who had been ill, had been brought up as well and was being taken care of by the best doctors money could buy. She was getting better. She had not had an episode in 3 months. Bernadette had become the chief executive of a new foundation that Adiz had set up, the Ruthie Me Bennett Foundation. They were building schools. They were funding scholarships. They were paying off mortgages for elderly widows in small towns across the South, the way Grandma had done quietly for years. Bernie came to work every day and loved her job, and her bakery had been turned into a chain of bakeries that employed dozens of people in the community. Geneva had become Adiz's right hand. The two of them ran the company together now, with Geneva handling the day-to-day operations and Adiz focusing on long-term vision and the foundation work. Russell. Adiz thought about Russell sometimes. After the divorce had been upheld and the lawsuit had been thrown out, Russell had tried to contact her many times. He had sent flowers. He had sent letters. He had even shown up once at the gates of her new home, where the security team had gently turned him away. She had blocked his number. She had instructed her lawyers to handle any communication from him. But last month, something had happened that surprised her. She had received a letter, a real letter in his handwriting. It had come through her grandmother's old church in Mississippi, sent there by Russell after Pastor Caldwell had reached out to him. Pastor Caldwell did things like that. He had a way of reaching people who would not be reached by anyone else. The letter was simple. Adiz, I have been doing a lot of thinking. I have been talking to a counselor at my brother's church. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm not asking to be in your life. I'm writing to say I am sorry. I was a bad husband. I was selfish. I cared more about being right than about being kind. I cared more about feeling important than about loving you. I see it now. I should have seen it sooner. You did not deserve any of what I did. I want our daughter to have a good father, even if I cannot be a husband to you. I am willing to do whatever you say, counseling, supervised visits, whatever you need to feel safe. If you say no, I understand. I will respect your wishes. Just know that I see what I did, and I am so sorry. Russell. Adiz had read the letter 3 times. Then she had given it to her therapist. Yes, she had a therapist now. Mama Falik had told her that successful black women still needed help, and that needing help was not weakness, it was wisdom. The therapist had said it was not Adiz's job to decide if Russell was telling the truth or not. It was only her job to decide if she wanted to take a small risk, for Tiana's sake. Adiz had thought about it for 2 weeks. Then she had agreed to supervised visits only, at a neutral location, with a child psychologist present once a month for 2 hours. The first visit had been 3 weeks ago. Tiana had been nervous. Russell had been quiet and humble. He had brought her a stuffed animal. He had asked her about school. He had not made any demands. He had not tried to charm anyone. Tiana had come home that night and crawled into Adi's lap on the couch. "Mama, Daddy is different." "Different how, baby?" "He is sad, but it is a good sad, like he is sad because he is sorry." "How do you feel about him, baby?" Tiana had thought for a long moment. "I think I want to see him again, but not too much, just sometimes." "Okay, baby, just sometimes." So they had set up another visit, and another. They were taking it slowly. There was no romance there would never be again. Adiz knew that part of her life was over, but for her daughter, she could allow space for something new, a father who was learning to be better. That was a gift she could give her child if it turned out to be real. The wind picked up on the roof. Adiz pulled her wrap tighter around her shoulders. A door opened behind her. Geneva stepped out. "Adiz, the car is ready. You should get going. Tiana will be expecting you." "I am coming." Tonight was a special night. Tiana's school was performing a play. Tiana was playing the lead role. Mama Falek had been rehearsing lines with her every night for 2 weeks. Bernie was meeting them at the school. Even Mr. Green had said he wanted to come, and Mr. Crawford, the whole family. Adiz took one more look at the city skyline. The sun was painting the buildings gold and pink and orange. She thought about the woman she had been 6 months ago, standing in the rain, holding trash bags, watching her rocking chair sit on the curb in the wet. That woman had been broken. The woman standing on this roof was whole. "Grandma," she whispered into the wind, "thank you." She turned and walked toward the door. It was a beautiful Saturday morning in October. The leaves on the trees in the backyard had turned bright red and gold. The air smelled like wood smoke and crisp apples. The house was full of people. Mama Falek was in the kitchen, frying plantains and stirring a big pot of jollof rice. Aunt Pearline, who was completely well now, was beside her, making her famous sweet potato pies. Bernadette had brought trays of baked goods from her bakery. Pastor Caldwell and Sister Magnolia had flown up from Mississippi for the weekend. Mr. Crawford was sitting in the big armchair in the living room, sipping a glass of bourbon and watching a football game with Mr. Green. Geneva and her wife had brought a beautiful platter of charcuterie and were arranging it on the dining table. Tiana, now 9 years old and tall for her age, was running around in the backyard with 3 of her friends from school and Cotton the poodle. They were chasing each other and screaming with laughter. Adiz stood at the kitchen window watching them. It had been 1 full year since the day she had stood in the rain. 1 year since her grandmother's lawyer had pulled up in a black town car and changed everything. 1 year since she had walked into a boardroom and stared down a billionaire. In that year, Bennett Holdings had grown by 12%. The new logistics partnership with Hartwell Industries had been wildly successful. Hartwell himself had become, against all odds, something close to a respectful colleague. He still came to quarterly meetings. He still nodded at her with that old sharp face. But there was a kind of grudging respect in his eyes now. He had started doing some quiet philanthropy of his own. People who knew him said he had changed. The Ruthie Mee Bennett Foundation had become one of the largest charitable foundations in the country. They had built 37 schools. They had funded over 4,000 college scholarships for first-generation black college students. They had renovated 42 churches in small towns. They had paid off the mortgages of nearly 600 elderly widows. They had built 2 hospitals in Nigeria in honor of Adiz's father's hometown. They had partnered with 3 major medical schools to fund pediatric research. Adiz had been featured on the cover of a major business magazine. The headline had read "The Quiet Queen." The article had told her grandmother's story in full. People had cried reading it. Sister Magnolia's church had received so many visitors that they had to start charging for tour just to manage the crowds. The money went to keeping up the building. There was no Russell here today. He had been seeing Tiana once a month for the whole year. He had been consistent. He had been kind. He had not made any romantic moves toward Adiz. He had not asked for anything. He had taken full responsibility for what he had done and was rebuilding himself slowly. Adiz did not love him anymore, but she did not hate him anymore either. He was simply Tiana's father, and she had made room for that in her life. She watched her daughter through the window. Tiana had grown so much. She was confident now. She was funny. She was kind. She was the first to share her snacks with the new kids at school. She was the first to invite the lonely kids to play. She was, in so many ways, becoming the kind of person Grandma Ruthie had been. Adiz felt tears in her eyes as she so often did these days. They were not sad tears anymore. They were just full tears, full of everything. A small hand slipped into hers. She looked down. Sister Magnolia had come up beside her, her white hair pulled back in its careful bun, her purple dress soft with age. "Child, you are quiet today." "I am thinking, Sister Magnolia." "What are you thinking about?" "I am thinking about how I never thought I would feel this happy again." The old woman squeezed her hand. "Your grandmother would have loved this day, child, all of these people, your daughter playing in the yard, your mama in the kitchen, your friends gathered under your roof. This is what she wanted for you." Adiz nodded slowly. "Sister Magnolia, may I ask you something?" "Anything, child." Did she know, at the very end, before she died, did she know what would happen? Did she know it would all work out? The old woman was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Child, your grandmother was a woman of faith. She did not know how the story would end. She just knew who you were, and she trusted that the Lord would carry you the rest of the way. And he did, child, he did." Adiz leaned her head against Sister Magnolia's small shoulder. Outside, Tiana was laughing. The sound carried through the open kitchen window like music. The doorbell rang. Adiz went to answer it. It was the photographer Geneva had hired for the day. She was going to take a big family portrait of everyone. They were going to hang it above the fireplace. "Mrs. Bennet, we are ready when you are." Adiz called everyone outside. They gathered in the backyard, under the big oak tree where the leaves were brightest. Mama Falik stood beside her. Tiana stood in front of her, with Cotton in her arms. Bernie and Geneva stood on the other side. Mr. Crawford and Sister Magnolia and Pastor Caldwell sat in chairs in front. Aunt Pearline and Mr. Green and all of Tiana's friends and their parents gathered around. The photographer set up his tripod. On three, everyone smile. 1, 2, 3. The flash went off. In that moment, in that frozen second, all of them were caught together. The old and the young, the blood family and the chosen family, the friends and the helpers and the loved ones. Adiz closed her eyes for just a heartbeat. She felt her grandmother there, standing right behind her, with her hand on her shoulder, smiling. "My sunshine, my strong girl, I told you all along." The photographer took the picture again, and again, and again. But the first one was the one they would hang above the fireplace. The first one captured the truth. A woman who had lost everything had built something more beautiful than she had ever imagined. And she had done it not by being hard, but by being good. Just like the woman who had raised her.